And this officer's never met my daughter. So I looked at her and says, how do you even know you just spoke with my daughter and not her trafficker? Like, you have no idea if that's who you spoke with or not.
I am talking to Ashley Wallace, mother of a transgender identified daughter who ran away from home as a minor and experienced just what the system can do for such children. Ashley, welcome to the program. I'm sorry that we had to meet under these circumstances.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me today.
So let's just sort of start from the beginning. Back in, you say, November of 2021 is when you got your first inkling about this. And at the time, my understanding is that you didn't really think about these gender issues very much. You were maybe on the other side of things, maybe a little bit. Can you talk about where you were in 2021 and what happened and how this started?
Yeah, in 2021, it was right after school got back into session for my kids, and my youngest daughter had started, she went back into person in eighth grade, and we'd moved to a new town. So she didn't have any friends really. She was making new friends. Everybody was virtual from the virtual classroom, and she started going back into school. So we were just kind of getting like acquainted with the new town that we lived in and working. Me and my husband were working and just, trying to get life kind of back to regular after COVID. And I was trying to, do the family thing, raise the kids and kind of just go about life. And yeah, I was really surprised about the gender thing with my daughter. I discovered it on a cell phone that wasn't hers that I had found in our house, and that's kind of how I found out about it with my daughter.
Yes, this shared cell phone, that was rather interesting to me. And you say that this was the result of a parent who thought that this was a good idea, that kids should have a shared cell phone they can pass around and do how is this supposed to connect them better than they're having their own phones? I don't understand. What was the logic behind this?
Yeah, I never actually found out the logic behind it. My daughter had a cell phone, and I was one of those parents that was very strict. Like social media was very monitored, and you didn't really get to be on your phone unless homework was done. I was very cautious of my kids being on the internet as much as I could be. After COVID and the schools rented them computers, and so at this point, she I found this phone and I had to really dig through the phone. I called the school at first and was like, this phone doesn't belong to my daughter. I don't know where this phone came from. And they says, well, we can't really do anything about it because, it's at your house. And they really wouldn't help me too much. So I had to like dig through the phone, and I had found out that this phone had been in another kid's hands as well. And from certain messages I had found through within the phone, I found another parent and contacted that parent and was like, I guess your kid had this phone before my kid. I don't know what's going on. And then this mom was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry this happened to you also. That mom had discovered her kid having the phone and got upset and had returned the phone to the other parent who was, I guess, paying for the phone? Because that's what my question was like, who's paying for this phone and why? So it was like a community phone that these kids were just like all like passing around, and like there was a different Instagram account that was logged in and a different Snapchat that was logged in, and it was pretty bizarre. And so I got it back. Well, first, what happened was I found very inappropriate things on that phone, like borderline child porn. I found a topless girl, a picture of a topless girl logged into some other kids' Snapchat that wasn't my daughter's Snapchat. And I was like, what's going on? And then I got really worried, like, now I've seen this. So I called the police and I said, I need you guys to come get this phone and I need you to go through it. And I need you guys to figure out what's going on because there's some inappropriate things in this phone. And the police came and looked kind of at the phone a little bit and said, well, what do you want us to do? And they didn't really do anything. And they said, you need to return this back to the parent that, who it belongs to. So I contacted the parent and she was rather rude. And we got the phone back. I actually deleted it as much as I could, reset the phone as much as I could because I was like scared it was going to fall into another family's hands. And now we're the second one that it had fallen into. So we returned the phone. The next day, the Springfield Police Department called me and said, Ashley, do you have that cell phone still? And I said, no, I've already returned it like you instructed me to, and I hadn't heard anything else about it. But while going through that phone is when I found out that my daughter was using a different name, using different pronouns. I brought it up to the school, who didn't seem surprised about that. So I kind of started assuming, oh, they are socially transitioning her, and nobody told me about it. So that's where that began with the phone.
It's not a continuous story. There's a period before October of 2022, when your daughter has been shopping for school clothes. She's starting as a freshman in high school. It seems like this is all behind her.
Yeah. Yeah, we
And tell us what happened.
yeah, totally. So we had a lot of conversations. We talked to her about the inappropriateness of the conversations that we found in the phone, and she was a little young to be using different pronouns and trying to be in these relationships with these people as well at 13. And she agreed, and she was like, yeah, you're right. And so I thought, and I was so naive, oh, I dodged a bullet, this is great. And then it was summer, so she didn't have any of that peer pressure. She was just, it was okay. And so then we took her school clothes shopping. She wanted all the cute clothes, all the, there was a couple of dresses that she wanted and some like t-shirts that had like funny designs on them. And she was kind of a quirky kid and liked to have like a fashion statement, but she was so excited about her new outfit as a freshman. And so then when she started school in September of 2022 as a freshman in high school, I just was so naive. I thought, oh, we dodged a bullet there. All of this gender stuff was behind us. And then it showed back up at my door.
So in October, she ran away at the age of 14.
Yeah.
And this followed a heated conversation about a list you discovered. Tell our listeners about that.
Yeah. So there was a list that I found on her phone. And about a week before I found this list, I had heard from her older brothers. They mentioned, oh, did you know that she's going by a different name at school and she's using different pronouns? She's going by they and he at school and using this different name. And so it kind of like brought up a bunch of things for me. So we were kind of like having these conversations again, like I thought this was behind us, what's going on. And we kind of talked about it. And she was so reluctant. She didn't really want to talk about it. So she kind of would try to avoid it. And then I was sitting next to her on the couch in October of 2022. And I see her typing something on her phone. And I was like, who are you talking to? I thought she was texting somebody. And like I said, I'm really pretty strict. And so I'm kind of nosy, nosy parent. And so I looked, and it was a list that she had in her phone of all of the times that her parents didn't affirm her, or all the times that her parents had misgendered her. And so I got kind of heated and was like, I just don't understand. You can't even explain this to us. You can't tell us what the reasoning is behind this. And that heated conversation, it's like with a teenager, a mother and a daughter, a teenager, right? So it's sometimes those things happen, and I overreacted and took some stuff off of her walls and was, it wasn't the right thing to do, but I was scared and nervous. I was fearful. I was like, how, like, I'm doing the best I can to try to understand. And she's just like going behind my back and like keeping all these documentations on us. I don't understand. And so then she ran away. It was 10:30 at night, and I went into my room, and I kind of was just upset. I was crying. I was like really worried. I'm looking up counselors online. I'm trying to figure out, we have to find a therapist. I don't know what to do. I go out to try to apologize to her because, I was in the wrong for like the way I reacted, and she was gone. And so I only knew a couple of her friends, like a couple of the parents. And so I text messaged them and was like, hey, have you seen her? And they had said no. And so I called the police and started the process of a missing persons report. And my husband drove around looking for her, and we couldn't find her. And then, so that's how that started. And then the police, when I went to the police station the next morning, because they told me they'd take my report over the phone, and then the that I still had to come in the next morning anyways and file some papers. So I went in the next morning, and they didn't apparently even have very much information from my call from the night before. They said, well, we don't really take missing persons reports over the phone, which I didn't realize. That's not how I understood it when I called them the night before. So I filled out all the paperwork, and I was just like beside myself. I was like, are you guys going to look for her? Are you going to help me make a flyer? This is like the very first like real situation of like my kid's missing. She's 14 and she left in the middle of the night. I don't feel like we know very many people. The parents I contacted said they hadn't seen her. Where is she? She left her phone at the house, so I had no way of even tracking her, knowing anything. And they says, well, we don't make missing persons flyers. We don't really look for kids. You're gonna, have to do all that on your own. And I was just like, what do you mean you're not going to look for a 14-year-old? Like, I understand, like, she left, but like, what if she gets in the car with somebody who's bad? Then what? Like, at what point does it become she ran away and she's missing? And they just were like, sorry, we just don't look for runaways. And so you have to make your own flyers. So I made some posts on Facebook, and then later, the next day, a mom messaged me and said, oh, your kid's been at my house since yesterday, and is saying that you kicked your kid out. Like, and this parent's using like he pronouns and using my daughter's other name and saying that I kicked my kid out for not loving them, for being transgendered. And I was just like, that's not what's happening. And this mom's trying to tell me, like, well, you need to really just pick your battles. And she's telling me all this stuff. And then she's like, well, we're going to go to the reptile museum tomorrow it's like in a different county, and maybe your kid can come along with. And I was like, absolutely not. This is not a reward. Like, no, what's your address? And I went to go pick her up, and this mom told my daughter that I was on my way to go pick her up. So by the time I got to the mom's house, she had taken off and ran again. So me and my husband drove around for a while. We were driving around, and the mom had called the police because at this point she realized I didn't kick my kid out. My kid was a runaway. And now my kid's left her residence. So she called the police, and the police came and they drove around for like 15 minutes. I had stopped them at one point in like a church parking lot, and I was like talking to them. I was like, are you going to find her? Are you going to help me find my kid? And the police officers were really just like dismissive. And they were like, we don't really look for runaways. And she probably knows somebody around here. And this is like 7 miles up the road from where we live, too. And like an area that, I mean, we were like pretty new still to this place. Like shutdown happened, and then we were working, and we really didn't know a lot of people. And so I was just like, I don't think she knows anybody around here. And I'm like, great, she's going to be sleeping outside. I was like, just beside myself. Me and my husband are driving around, and we drive past somebody who's shooting up on the side of a dairy mart. And I'm like, just terrified. My 14-year-old is walking around this. And we decided about 1:30 in the morning, we there's nothing we can do. We can't find her. We've been driving around for hours now. And we turn around the block and there she is at 1:30 in the morning in like just walking down the road holding a stuffed frog and like no jacket, and it's super cold in Oregon. And I get out of the truck and I don't want her to run, so I'm like very careful, and she's just like frozen, and she looks at me and I'm like, "Are you okay?" And I cry and I hug her and she doesn't want to hug me back, and I get her into the truck. But the police informed us, if you locate her, you have to call us and let us know so that we can make sure that she's safe. Like they said, they had to make eyes on her. So I called and said, "Okay, we got her back. She's in our truck. We're going home." And they said, "Well, we need to send over cahoots to make sure they're the crisis intervention for our county."
I have to say, this is where you're going wrong, and I'm not beating up on you here. I'm just saying that when police are telling you, okay, call us the minute you find your daughter. Actually, what you need to do is get your daughter home and then call the police. You can't
Yeah.
play the game the way they want you to play it. So they send out this cahoots, which is a sort of mobile crisis intervention thing, to the parking lot where you are sitting there with your daughter in the vehicle. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, totally. And you're absolutely right. And I like going making my timeline, I've looked back like, oh yeah, I should have not did that either. Like I can't trust the police if they wouldn't look for her, but now they want to make sure she's okay. That seems pretty backwards. So they sent cahoots, and cahoots talked to me while my daughter was in the truck with my husband, and then they wanted to talk to my daughter. And here's my second mistake. I didn't know because I'm scared and I'm terrified and all this is new and I'm so worried about my daughter and what's going to happen. Like I thought these people would be on my side, and they were like, "Well, we would like to talk to your daughter." And I let them talk to her by themselves. Looking back now, that's something else. I'm just like, that was another, I should not have did that. But then they informed me, well, she doesn't want to go home. And she had told my husband, he informed me of this later, that she had told him, well, I have a plan. And he was like, well, what's your plan? And she wouldn't tell him what the plan was. So Cahoots tells me, well, she doesn't want to go home. And there's this youth shelter. It's a crisis youth shelter. And I'm going to say their name, the Station 7 Looking Glass. They're downtown Eugene, and they have a lot of resources and help, and you'll at least know that she's at home or at their place, I mean, sleeping, and like she'll get a good meal, and that way you'll know that she's not just wandering the streets or just randomly somewhere, because she probably would leave your house again. So they kind of like made me feel like that's like the better option, because I was scared like if I brought her home she might leave again. So I agreed, and I was like, well, they have resources, right? So naive. They have resources. They'll have therapies. They'll have things, and these people will be on my side. And the next day, Child Protective Services showed up at my house.
Yes, so now comes the Inquisition. You have had Child Protective Services called, I believe, 3 times on you now, and they have done multiple investigations. So tell us about those investigations. And of course, they all came back negative. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's correct. 3 separate times. So the first one was in October, and they showed up, and they were saying that my daughter had reported that my husband had pushed her. And I was just like blown away by that, because remember, my daughter left because of a fight her and I had, not anything to do with my husband. And he's always been kind of the, you know, like person in the middle, like mediating, like, mother daughter kind of issues, and so it was just pretty shocking. And we have 2 other kids, so they've talked to them too. And they, those accusations were unfounded, and this has like really launched me into my like research of like these kids that are like identifying as transgendered, and what the measures that they would go to if parents don't believe them. And then I started reading stories of like other kids, and I started hearing from other parents where kids were told to, well, if your parents don't affirm you, just report that they slapped you, just report that they, hit you or shoved you, or there's all these things. And so that's kind of where I gathered that came from. And then it kind of gotten brought up in some counseling things, that the Station 7 had referred us to a counselor, and it kind of got brought up that, yeah, she was just mad and she was just kind of saying things so she could get what she want. And this Looking Glass Station 7 youth shelter, they have a reunification program. And so at one point, I had to go to a meeting with them, and I asked my daughter, I says, well, what exactly is your plan here? And I went by myself. My husband didn't go to that meeting because, I wanted to be able to hear what my daughter would have to say. And I was like, I don't understand. When did this happen? What are you talking about? And she couldn't give me anything. And she just said, well, I just don't like your mood when you're at home. And I'm going to go to foster care. And she was so like angry. And I was just like, do you even know how that works? Like, that's not how that works. You can't just go to foster care. And and then our second CPS investigation was the next time that she ran away in May of 2023. And that one was for we were being investigated for mental injury for not affirming, because she ran away and that she went back to that youth shelter, and I didn't give permission that time for her to stay there because it did not help our family at all. And now I'm learning, right? And I'm like, I'm not going to let them, indoctrinate themselves to my family again. No, she can't stay there. She has a family. She can come home. And so they reported me. And the only reason I know for a fact that the Looking Glass Station 7 reported me on that second report was because when I got my record, DHS forgot to block out who the reporter was, which they're supposed to block it out, but they didn't. And and then the third time we were investigated was when she ran away again in August of 2023. And also again for mental injury for not affirming, even though we had been playing and this game, we had been affirming, because the first CPS reporter told us that it was important to affirm if, for my daughter's mental health. They used that whole like thing of like, well, she could be at risk for harming herself if you don't affirm. And so when she ran away again in May, she had said that we weren't affirming, but we still were affirming at that point. And then in August, we decided we didn't want to affirm anymore. And then we were investigated again for not affirming. And that time it was true. We were not affirming on our third Child Protective Services report investigation.
And they're doing such a great job of watching after her. There was another location where you found her, the Drop Eugene Youth Era, and
Yeah.
apparently that's tell us about that.
Yeah, in August, when she ran away, the first time in August when she ran away, we had known that she'd been going to this youth center, the Drop in Eugene. And so husband went down there, my husband and my son, and they found her there. And it was just like a hangout place for kids to be able to be on computers, and there's no like monitoring. They don't watch the computers or what the kids are doing or who they're talking to. And they were like, you need to come home. My son was like, you need to go home. Mom wants you to be at home. And when my husband got there, they kicked my son out of the building and locked my son and my husband out while my daughter was inside. So my husband called the police and said, they're kidnapping our kid. And then they called the police also on my husband and said that he was being a menace and intimidating people. But all he was doing was standing outside of the door. They had our kid inside of their building with the doors locked. And when the police came, they said that they couldn't do anything, that there was nothing illegal happening, and that if she wanted to be there, she was allowed to be there. And my husband is like, well, she needs to come home. Like, we said that she's not allowed to be there. And they said, well, we can't make a 15-year-old return home or leave somewhere that she wants to be.
Apparently, there was a threat at some point that the officer spoke with your daughter and she made a suicide threat to be taken away to the hospital, which, by the way, is another one of these moves that they teach the trans kids.
So I ended up going to the police station to file a missing persons report instead of going down to the youth center where she was, because I figured, well, if like they'll at least let me know what's going on if I make a police report. And because they wouldn't take one from my husband because my husband is her stepdad. And so I think that's part of that. But so then the police officer called me and says, okay, I've talked with your daughter and she's threatening to commit suicide if she goes to your house. So I have to take her down to the hospital. So they took her to the hospital, and she didn't meet criteria for suicidal ideation. But in that chunk of time from, and I don't know who reported this time to Child Protective Services, if it was the youth center or if it was the hospital, because my kid was in there for the suicidal ideation. But we that was our third report in our third investigation, and but she didn't meet criteria to actually have a bed and be held. And so, but they kept her there until they could get our caseworker, our new caseworker, to talk with us. And so our new caseworker started talking with us and getting everything kind of like the ball rolling on the investigation and clearing that we were safe. And so we were able to go pick my daughter up. So I picked her up and I brought her back home. And the plan was with the hospital that she could see some like emergency therapists and whatnot, and that's how they could let it so she could come home or whatnot. And then she'd only stayed at my house through the weekend and left again. She promised our caseworker, yeah, I'll do the counseling, I'll work with my mom, I'll participate in all the family stuff. And then on Monday at 3:30 in the morning, because all the businesses for the youth centers and things would be open again, she left. So she stayed through the weekend and left again. And that was the last time that I saw her.
So she sneaks away, and you file another missing person report. And then it stretches into September, and I'm sure you're beside yourself all this time. And you discover something about her school is going on. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I have an app on my phone that will show me my kids' like attendance and their homework and their grades and things. And so I was waiting to see if she was going to show up at school when school started back up, and then she was marked truant, and then she was, second day she wasn't there, and then like um couple it was like, what was it, like September 12th, so like we're like the second week into the school, I realized that she's been removed from the app, and but the other two kids were still on the app so I could still see their information. So I called the school that she was in and I said, well, what's going on? And they said, oh, this new school requested transfers. It's like, what do you mean? And that's how I found out that she went to a new school. I didn't give anybody permission to do that. How can a school just request records to be transferred to a new school? And so we still had a missing persons report filed on her and a open CPS case. So I called my caseworker too, and my caseworker is just like, well, kid, all our job is to make sure that you're safe, which I've done. You are safe, but CPS wasn't helpful. All the school could tell me was that her records got transferred over. I call the school, the new school, and they won't talk to me. They were like, well, we can't give you any information. I was like, what do you mean you can't give me information? Like, is my kid there or not? And they just couldn't tell me. And um so I let the police know after, well, actually what happened was the police called me in the end of October, I believe it was. They called me and said, well, it's been a while now since this missing persons report's been open. We need to come do a DNA test. And I was like, okay, well, have you heard from your daughter at all? And I was like, no, but I found out that she's at this other school, but they won't tell me anything. They won't like give me any information at all or confirm or deny if she's there. And so then they ended up going to that school themselves and investigating, and they discovered that she was there. And then the police got me added to the school records. And then the school, they tried to tell me in an email that they just didn't know that I was the parent. They didn't know who the parent was. They used the McKinney-Vento Act and listed my daughter as an unaccompanied minor to change school districts without my permission. And
An
I said,
unaccompanied minor. Is this a general category of minor, or is this something intended for immigrants? What is this category?
yeah, so apparently, and I don't know too much of the details. I get a lot of runaround when I ask about it, but an unaccompanied minor can be any minor who's ran away from home or has been kicked out, is what they told me. Or anything on where a minor is no longer in their home. The McKinney-Vento Act helps these kids access their educational rights and goals by putting them in whatever school they want, giving them resources. Um, I guess I was informed by the police that they were giving my daughter food assistance. They were helping her with her medical insurance. They helped her get a cell phone. They are helping her get her school supplies and all these things within this program. And I'm just like, so you're bribing her to not be in my home is what you guys are doing. And no one can answer my questions on that. So I was like, she's not unaccompanied. She has a home. She has a room. She has her own room. She has parents that love her. She's got siblings. She's got pets. She's not homeless. She's not unaccompanied. But they changed her school districts anyways without my permission, and it took like almost 2 months for them to add me to the records for me to even be able to find out anything about her attendance or like any of her grades or anything about that.
And nobody cross-referenced to see whether this child was maybe a missing person or not, this unaccompanied minor.
No, they don't cross-reference, and I've asked them about that, and they said that it's not their job to question when a kid says that they're unaccompanied. They don't, it's not their job. They just, if a kid wants to go to a new school and they claim that they are unaccompanied, they just help a kid. That's what I've been told. Yeah, Becca Larson works for 15th Night, and she's a liaison with the McKinney-Vento. And she is the woman who my daughter reached out to, or was maybe my daughter was assigned to her. I don't know exactly how they came in contact, but she's the one who helped change my daughter's school districts. And when I emailed her about it in December, she was pretty like passive about it, like copy paste information from McKinney-Vento's website and what their jobs are. And then when I finally spoke to her here in March, so in March, I found out that my daughter's no longer in school. And so I called Becca Larson and I said, now what? Now you guys have lost my kid. Like, you helped change her school districts without my permission. You've helped give her all of these resources. You never investigated my family. You've never spoke with me. You don't know who I am or anything about us. And you helped change her schools and her, without my, permission at all. And now she's not in school at all. And now where is she? Like, how do we know that she's okay or safe? And Becca said, well, I talked to her. I was worried about it. But I don't really know what's going on. And I would never keep a kid from their parents. And, it was just all this runaround stuff. And she was so sorry. But that's all I really know. She's very passive and dismissive on my feelings on it. And now she's not responding to me since then. Like, she said she would let me know if she made contact with my daughter, but she's has not responded to my text messages if she's had any contact. So I don't know. So when they located my daughter at her new school in November of 2023, and they got me added to her school records so that I could see like her attendance and her grades, the police sergeant James Wilson from Springfield Police Department, he kind of insinuated like, well, maybe you should just try to like build trust with your daughter and just kind of play it from there because we can't make a 15-year-old return home. And it sounds like she's living with a friend, but she's claiming to be homeless. And I was like, she's not homeless. She has a home. And again, it's like all of this has traumatized me and has like pushed me into these fearful, like what's going to happen and do I have to listen to them and what are my rights? And because I've ran into so many walls being, and doors being slammed in my face. So I don't know what I can or can't do. And so he removed her from the missing persons report and didn't make her return home. And I said, well, what do you know which friend she's living with? Like, who are these people? And he said, well, she won't give me that information. But I've tried to ask, how come I was investigated 3 separate times by Child Protective Services, but whoever she's living with doesn't have to be investigated to make sure that their home is safe? Like, we had to make sure my home was safe. Why are we not making sure their home is safe? Why am I not allowed to know any information on my daughter, like where she's living and if she's living with safe people that aren't harming her or trafficking her or doing awful things, who knows what kinds of paths she's on. But they just are really dismissive, and they removed her from the missing persons report. And I could see her attendance, which wasn't that great. And I called the school and it says, I'm going to come down there. I want to see my daughter. And they said, well, we're not going to allow, and they used they pronouns, and they used her preferred name. We're not going to allow them to have a meeting with you if they don't feel safe. And I said, you already know that I've been deemed safe by Child Protective Services. It's their job to determine if I'm safe or not. And 3 separate times my home has already been deemed safe. So I want to come down and see my kid. But then it re-triggers trauma for me. So I didn't know how it was going to go. If they're not going to make her come to the office, or they're not going to allow her to see me, like, they could call her, I could go down to the school, but schools are protected. You can't really make a scene at the school. And if they're not going to have her come to the office, I wouldn't be able to see her anyways. So then I just felt like it was like one more, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, just hopeless. Like, they won't find her. They won't tell her they won't tell me where she's living. They won't try to, get this family back together or have actually appropriate resources that can, like, build on communication to figure out what's actually going on. Um, and then also, when I decided to stop affirming her in August, when she ran away that last time, it was because I stopped affirming her. But like before, like a couple weeks before that, before she ran away, we told her, we're not going to affirm you no more because you're so anxious all the time, and your anxiety and your mental health. And let's put all of this on the back burner and just kind of focus on you, and like getting you stable and your mental health, and kind of figure out why you're saying that you hate the person you were before. Let's figure out what's going on with that. And she seemed okay with it. She like livened up and started playing the ukulele when my uncle was over. She was like all of a sudden like out of her bubble, not shy anymore. And I just felt so like I did the right thing, and it just made me feel good. And then a couple weeks after that is when she ran away and told the youth shelters, the youth programs, I mean, that it was because we weren't affirming. But she had like kind of reverted back to her old self there for those couple of weeks, making me feel like I did the right thing.
She is a sophomore. It's the fall of 2023 when this is happening.
Yeah.
Um, and so we come to the holiday period, right? It's getting to
Yeah.
be December, Christmas, January. And now tell us about what has been happening just at the turn of the year.
Yeah, so right before Christmas break at her new school, I was trying to communicate with the school, and they were they were not really very communicative. In the emails, I was saying, well, then if you guys aren't going to tell me where she is, you guys can be responsible if something happens for her, since you guys are pretty much hiding her from me and protecting her from whatever you think you're protecting her from, but not giving me information. And I decided to, when Christmas break happened, like the second day into the winter break for the kids for the school, I decided to open up another missing persons report. And I was like, I'm not going to take no for an answer. So I went to the police department and I filed another missing persons report, because now they can't use the whole, well, she's at school, because she's not, because it's Christmas break. So where is she during the winter months and while she's not in school? Like, what is happening? So they reopened the case, but it didn't do a lot. We went through the Christmas. Well, her birthday first was a couple days before that, and then we had Christmas. So she turned 16, then Christmas. Without her, I had gotten her Christmas presents, kind of waiting to see if she would reach out. And then January came. We had that like ice storm that happened here in Oregon, and I was like really worried, not knowing, is she really homeless? Is she staying with people? What's going on? And my son was able to, we ended up getting her phone number. And so my son texted her and called her, and she actually responded to him. And they were talking a little bit. And she said to him, he asked her, "Did you have a good Christmas and a good birthday?" And she says, "Oh yeah, I bought myself a lava lamp and some plants." And they were just kind of, it's just general talk, but she had told him that she'd gotten a phone from a program that would help her get phones. That's how she had a phone. And then I posted anonymously. I was in a Eugene moms Facebook group, and so it was for like moms in Eugene, Oregon, and just general moms, not moms with gender identified kids or anything, just in general. And I posted anonymously, and I left everything about gender out of it. And I said there's some youth programs in the community that help angry teenagers run away, and they enable them and they encourage them and they give them state assistance for, being homeless. And I was trying to like encourage parents, like, look at where the money is going. Like, why is the homeless youth community like increasing every year? How much funding are they getting, that kind of thing. And I don't know very many people around here, so nobody would have known that that was me posting, first of all, or that it was about mine and my daughter's situation, unless they knew us or knew her. And as far as I know, she's not on Facebook, and she certainly isn't a mom, so she wouldn't be in a mom's group. And my son got a bunch of text messages after that post. Why is Ashley, not even calling me mom, posting about me on Facebook and saying that I'm just an angry teen and rebellious and a troublemaker? And she was like cussing at him and saying, "You are all dead to me. Do not contact me. Ashley's crazy. She's stalking me." And that was that. She didn't want anything to do with us, didn't want to talk to us anymore. And then, so that was pretty hard. And my son, it was, this has hurt him a lot too. He's 2 years older than her, and he's been really devastated by this whole thing too. Like, I've lost my sister, he says, and he's like, I tried to like relate to her even when she was going through all these periods, like trying to, like, we played guitar together and we would read books together and play games, and like they would ride the bus sometimes, into Eugene. They went to this like music place one time, and he had some fond memories. And then he was like, I just feel like she just slapped me in the face and just doesn't care about her family anymore and just wrote us off, and all because she wants to change who she is, but we liked who she was. So it's been pretty hard for him. So he's at the point where it's like, okay, fine, I'm not gonna, talk to her no more if she doesn't want to. And she hasn't responded back. I think he texted her one time after that, and it seems like maybe he's now blocked. I've been blocked already from the very beginning when I found her phone number. Um, and so then in February, they went to her, Becca Larson called the police with my daughter and the school counselor to report that she wasn't missing. So they closed that missing persons report again, the one that I had opened right at Christmas break. And the Sergeant James Wilson had left me a voicemail and said, "I already told you that she's not missing. She's at school. She's got this program that's monitoring her, and she's not missing. So we're removing her from the missing persons case," is what the voicemail said. And that's kind of the last that was like, well, that was the last missing persons report I was able to open. I
When you
tried.
most recently tried to file another one, you had a very interesting conversation, and I think that your give a damn had busted. Tell us about that.
Yeah, my give a damn did bust. I'm so, it's just this whole thing is absurd. So I found out she was no longer in school. So I called Becca Larson and Sergeant Wilson, and I left both of them voicemails, and then ended up talking to both of them, and had stated, "You guys have lost my kid," under the whole, "Oh, she's not missing, she's at school." But now she's not at school. And also I got the reports of her attendance when she was at that school, and her attendance was awful. She barely was attending that school. So I tried to file another missing persons report, and I decided to go to Eugene instead of Springfield because we live in Springfield. So I went to the Eugene Police Department, and they said, "Well, because you live in Springfield, you have to go there instead." And I was like, "Yeah, but she's missing out of Eugene because she was in school." And they didn't help me. So I went to the Springfield police station and tried to file, and then they had an officer come in and talk to me, And I was there forever, like a couple hours. And then when the officer had come in and was talking with me, they were like, "Well, you've already opened a couple of missing persons reports. They've made contact. She's stated that she's not missing." And then while I was talking with the officer, my daughter supposedly called. And so this officer went into the back and I and talked to my daughter and for a little while and then came back and was like, "Okay, I spoke with her on the phone. She doesn't want to come home." She sounded very mature. She was very articulate. I asked her why she wasn't in school anymore, and she said that she just felt like she was falling too far behind and that she was going to go to a charter school and where there was more one-on-one with teacher and student ratios and it was just going to be better. And this officer's like explaining all this to me and telling me all this. Like she was so mature sounding and I was like, and this officer's never met my daughter. So I looked at her and said, "How do you even know you just spoke with my daughter and not her trafficker? Like, you have no idea if that's who you spoke with or not. Like, anybody could say they were my daughter on the phone." And she didn't really say much. She's like, "No, we're not going to be negative and think that way." And I was like, "So you're not going to open a missing persons report? I just don't get to know where she is." And the officer said, "No, we can't open one because she made contact and she's pretty much emancipated just without the documentation saying so because she's 16 now and maybe you should just try to come from a place of kindness and just try to reach out." And how am I supposed to reach out when she has me blocked? That's what happened with that. And then Becca said she would let me know if she had contact with my daughter, but now Becca's not talking to me. And Station 7, that Looking Glass shelter, they reach out to families when the families have been through their system. They called me last week actually and said, "We want to check in to see how things are going." And I just was like, "What do you mean? Like, I haven't seen my daughter in over 9 months. You guys have probably seen her sooner than I have." And this guy had never met my daughter. He works on the day shift, I guess, and this youth shelter has like drop-in services. And I said, "Well, has she been there? Like, has there been any activity of her being over there or, utilizing your guys' services?" And I guess she had been there a couple of weeks ago, and she told them that she reported she was doing well and that she was going to school. And I said, "Oh, what school is she going to?" And he says, "Well, she didn't say that information, so we don't really know."
And this school where you got to see that her grades were terrible and that she wasn't going to class. There was one class where she seemed to be doing well. Which one was that?
Yeah. Her theater class. Her theater class was the only class that she seemed to consistently attend and her grade was pretty well in the theater, any type of drama or theater class that she had. That she did pretty well in that one it seemed like and that was that was the only one really. She failed all of her other classes. And I recently found out too that school has a doctor's office clinic there. Somebody posted on Facebook in one of the groups like, "Oh, I'm trying to find hormone therapy for my child." I'm just like, why are people abusing their children with putting them on hormones? Anyways, another parent responded and says, "Oh, this high school has a clinic there and they give my kids the hormone therapies and through the school. Like there's a doctor's office clinic through through or at the school. I'm not entirely sure how it's set up, but so I had noticed a trend too on the app with her attendance that there was a pattern of days, like every couple weeks or so, that she was in the health room. They would mark it like an excused tardy for class or an excused health room, like kind of code on there. So I kind of was questioning, and I have no proof. I don't know. But then finding out now that they have a clinic there, she quite possibly was getting hormone treatments while attending school.
That was part of the plan, yes. And also I have other information about not in your state, but in other states where the bureaucracy has very carefully constructed these systems like you're talking about, that the teen can go to the shelter, the teen can access all of these services, including a phone, including housing, including help with other issues like food and whatnot. Uh, it's all set up in order to take the child away from the parents because of course we have to rescue the trans kids from the evil parents who are going to misgender them and make them want to kill themselves is the idea. Was it your sense throughout this process that you were seen as the enemy, that you were in a drama triangle with everyone that you came into contact with?
Yeah. Yeah, I was definitely viewed as the bad parent, the abusive parent for just questioning where, like, that's where it really started, was just questioning, like, why do you feel this way? What's going on? Wanting to understand. And then the further research that I did, really understanding the harm that's happening to these kids when they take hormones and when they socially transition. And then this is like the only mental illness that people are just affirming and condoning. We don't condone people that have schizophrenia and hear voices, and we don't affirm people that are, have bulimia. Like, why are we affirming this to harm children? But then they labeled me the abusive one.
Ashley, you've done a terrific job telling me this story today. I don't know how you are able to hold it together, except that maybe you're a little angry and maybe the anger is now driving you. Um, I have to ask, where were you in terms of your politics? And I hate to discuss politics, but we need to for just a moment. Where were you in your politics in 2021 versus where you are today?
Yeah. So I've never been very like much of a political person, but always about freedom and like let people be free and do what they want as long as they're not harming other people. Kind of more so on the liberal side. But also, just I think people should have rights to own their guns and, do that kind of thing. But just freedom. I always was very much about freedom and people speaking their voice, and was very supportive of people and their identities. And then I realized that this has all crept in to our children. And now I've really leaned more towards like, I am not going to vote Democrat, probably. And I'm very much more leaning towards the Republican side of things a lot more now because I can see it pretty clear that it seems like Democrats try to lead this thing. I don't know. There's a lot with that, and I need to educate myself more on the politics, but I definitely don't feel the same. I don't feel like everything should be free for all anymore. I used to feel more about like harm reduction. I used to think that was important too. And now I realized when my daughter came home one time with Narcan, carrying it around, I was like, why are you hanging out with people that are gonna have the potential to overdose? And so now I'm like not even sure if I agree with that. And it seems like all of the places that are enabling these sorts of behaviors like homelessness and the drug use and that kind of thing is where these things are like happening with families. Like they're all in these places where they can get the resources for free. And so we're really just enabling people. And I just that's a kind of a question I constantly kind of have in my head, like, are we teaching our kids how to be brave and face uncomfortable situations? Or are we teaching and enabling them how to run away and avoid situations? And we should be teaching our kids how to build life skills, not how to get things handed to them for free.
You've had a bit of a transformation personally. I won't ask you to speak for your son, but I detect from what you said that he is roughly at voting age. Does he feel disillusioned in any kind of way that, might affect the way he thinks in the future? Has it changed him at all?
Yeah, I think he used to be more about freedom as well, and he just actually just bought a hoodie that said my pronouns are fuck you. It's like he's very against this whole thing now, and he's been like making comments to people, and he's joining the Navy, and my stepson's also joining the Navy, and they are very much more about the America and not this enabling concept, I think.
Well, that is terrific. That really shows what kind of a political journey people are taking when they experience this kind of interaction with the gender bureaucracy, let's call it.
And like people and parents in general need to be aware. And I feel like school systems and youth programs really should start doing their research on this whole thing instead of just enabling these kids and breaking up families. They really need to figure out how to become trauma informed and, not step in between family belief systems. Oh yeah, my Substack is where I've really utilized being able to write. It's been super helpful to be able to like get my my feelings out. I've written in my journal and then I've wrote on Substack and I've submitted some other articles in a couple of places. My Substack is Eternal Echoes, and I'm just really getting to a place of starting to support other parents becoming trauma informed and specializing in helping other parents with ROGD kids in processing the anger and the grief, the hurt and the confusion that comes up with it, and just kind of navigating that. I've been asked a lot by people, how are you standing up and how are you doing this and speaking? And you're right, I am coming from a place of anger, but I've kind of figured out how to take my sacred holy anger and turn it into like fuel to like motivate me and become trauma informed so I can start getting to a place of helping other people because no parent should have to go through this.